What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another SWAC Week 8 recap, man. And we got a lot to get into, man. So if you're new, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and comment below your takeaways, reactions to this Week 8 of SWAC action, man. We had a lot of games to talk about. So let's kick it off with the game of the week that we had here on the Bluebloods, which was Prairie View going down to Baton Rouge to take on Southern for their homecoming. And this was one where I felt like the picks were really 50-50. There was a lot of people who thought Prairie View wasn't going to be able to overcome their demons down there in Baton Rouge, and that Southern was going to come away with the win just because of the history of that series and it being on the road and homecoming and that run game. Then there were other people like myself who picked Prairie View just because of how dominant they've really been on both sides of the ball at times this season. So Prairie View takes control of the SWAC West as they get a huge win over Southern this weekend. And for me, as great as Alcorn's played, if there was any question on who should be the favorite right now in the SWAC West, it was apparent after what happened in Mumford Stadium this weekend. And for me, it was more not only Prairie View executing at a very, very high level, it was that Southern's problems really like that we saw throughout the season that we were like, okay, they can overcome them here, they can overcome them there. They were really exposed on Saturday night, and you saw what happened when you have these glaring holes against a team that equals you in talent and that can play just as good football as you. And we'll kind of get into that. But Jason Rollins, I've talked to a few Southern fans that I know, and I think he's on his way out. According to if they have their way, he's on his way out. But let's start with Prairie View because they deserve major credit for going on the road against a team who has historically dominated them in a homecoming environment where a lot of people, okay, so a lot of people told me this was a game to prove themselves. And they did it. And this was head coach's Eric Dooley's first win over Southern since he's been at Prairie View as well. So looking at how they did it, man. Outside of two first quarter interceptions by Jawan Pass, I thought he played pretty well this weekend. He really helped this run game get going by being efficient through the air and not allowing Southern to get comfortable in what type of defense they were running. You saw this Panthers team put up 34 points in the final two quarters to really put the game away. And Jawan Pass completed over 70% of his passes, 280 through the air, was averaging over 10 yards per attempt with two touchdowns, along with those two interceptions. But the key for me was he had the highest completion percentage of the season. And that was really the key for this offense. And it really helped allow what the rushing attack did down the stretch. And for that, let's give a round of applause to this rushing attack for the Panthers. They had their second highest rushing total of the season with a season high of 4 rushing touchdowns in Baton Rouge on homecoming, and they outrushed Southern, who came in leading the SWAC. Now, Prairie View was second, but they outrushed the team who, my guy Oscrip always says, if you think you can run the ball, Southern does it better. Well, on Saturday night, this Panthers team did it better than Southern by a significant margin. And Lademian Brooks, man, 108 yards, over 8 yards per carry, and 2 rushing touchdowns. And along with Jaden Stewart, over 80 yards rushing, almost 7 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. These guys did their thing. The offensive line did a great job, controlling the line of scrimmage, making holes for these backs, protecting passing. I told you on the preview, this Prairie View offense came in averaging the most yards per game in the SWAC for an offense while allowing the least amount of sacks in the SWAC. So this offensive line was being greatly overlooked, and they really showed why they're so great. And on top of that, Southern did have some players out on the D line, starting with Jordan Lewis, of course. But I'm not taking anything away from what Prairie View did this weekend and how dominant they were, especially in the second half. And I want everyone who's watching this to go ahead and give their flowers to Prairie View's defense. There was a lot of people who tried to discredit them, but they were a top 3 SWAC unit for a reason, and they showed what they could do if they were on. They held Southern to less than 250 total yards, 3 for 15 on third downs, less than 15 first downs, forced 3 turnovers. And against a team that prides themselves in winning the time of possession and controlling the pace of a game, they won that on the road against one of the best time of possession rushing teams in the SWAC. And on top of that, man, I mentioned him in the pregame. Jason Dumas, a defensive tackle, is really showing why he was a preseason SWAC All-American. 2 sacks from a defensive tackle spot. And then you also had Trayshawn Smith, who was absolutely everywhere for Prairie View this weekend with 13 total tackles, which led the Panthers on that defensive side of the ball. This defense had a lot of questions coming in, guys. And even though I picked Prairie View, I was kind of worried because if you remember, they gave up over 200 on the ground to Bethune-Cookman last week, but they stepped up to the challenge on the road, holding Southern to less than 130 yards rushing, less than 3.5 yards per carry. And this was the stat that I think really defined the night that I haven't heard many other channels talk about. They did not allow an explosive run this game. The longest run for Southern was 10 yards. And that's for one of the most explosive teams in the SWAC, averaging almost over 6 yards per play. Those running backs can be so explosive, and Prairie View just absolutely controlled the front, the defensive front, and they made play after play. So you've got to give this defense their credit. No Southern running back rushed for over 60 yards, and the only person to really rush for a touchdown was Ladarius Skelton, and it really kind of, and one of them came really late. Where I don't love the celebrating when you're down by like 30, but we'll kind of let that be. But this performance exemplifies what this Panthers defense can do. I thought this was one of the more impressive. I would say right now, just off the top of my head, I would say this was the second most impressive performance in the SWAC this year. I had Jackson State and what they did in Huntsville number 1. I put this one at number 2 right now because, I mean, for them to come in and play like this and win this game like they did, I think you got to give Prairie View all the credit. And on the other side, man, Southern was finally exposed in terms of that passing game being so one-dimensional, and also that defense has been really bad this year, and it really came back to bite them, giving up over 500 yards to Prairie View. But this also pretty much eliminates the Jaguars from the SWAC championship contention, especially when you look ahead. They still have Alcorn, they still have FAMU, and they still have Jackson State on their schedule. So this was really a must-win game. And they had so many chances, especially after the 2 costly interceptions by a pass. One, they did turn into points, so credit to them for their first touchdown. But the other one was wasted, especially when they got a pick inside the red zone, like inside I believe it was like the 20-yard line they picked off pass. So they not only took points away from Prairie View, but they had a great shot to really get established on all the offensive side of the ball, and they could not do it. The lack of control in the line of scrimmage really hurt this offense. They couldn't generate any explosive plays, and they consistently found themselves in uncomfortable third down situations. And without that run game that they love to do, that they love to lean on so much, this offense just really seemed out of sync all night long. And number one thing for Southern this offseason, I don't care who the coach is, who the offensive coordinator is, anything like that. The number one thing for Southern is they have to find a QB. If that's going to keep them from competing for a SWAC championship in the next coming years, when you look at Pass, when you look at Shador, when you look at Andrew Bodie at Texas Southern, you look at Felix Harper, you're going to have a quarterback to compete for anything in the SWAC. And they're going to have to find someone, because when you look at their losses, they always have a QB deficit this year. You look at Pass, you look at Orgeron for McNeese, you look at Bodie at Texas Southern. You have to have a good quarterback in the SWAC in these non-conference games to win. The recipe of running the ball as much as they do and not relying on the pass only works when you have the talent advantage in the game. But when you face a defense like Prairie View, like a Jackson State, like a FAMU that can evenly match your talent, this formula is not going to work. McDaniel averaging 5 yards of completion, 1 touchdown, a pick, less than 115 yards passing, and Skelton being 1 for 4 for 6 yards and a pick. That is going to get you beat week in and week out when you face teams that are on or above your level. And this rushing attack suffers because defenses just don't respect the pass. They're going to load the box, and they're going to be just fine with Southern, forcing Southern to air it out. And yeah, they'll give up the 1-2 plays, like they give up the touchdown for McDaniel. They'll give up those plays because they know it's not sustainable, and they know you cannot consistently attack the back end of their defense. So that was the biggest thing for Southern. They have listen, it's now moving on to just can you put some teams on upset alert at the end of the season? But the SWAC championship dream is pretty much dead right now. And now Rollins has to figure out what to do with this team. Prairie View controls their own destiny. A win against Alcorn in 2 weeks, and it's Panthers and probably Jackson State in the SWAC title game. But other than that, let's go ahead and move on here to the other game we previewed on this channel, and that was Jackson State dominating Bethune-Cookman, especially after the first quarter, man. Listen, it was an interesting game, and when I say interesting, guys, I mean for one quarter. And maybe like a quarter and like a fourth or whatever you want to call it, or a third. 9-0 going into like the early second quarter, and then Jackson State just ripped Bethune-Cookman apart. From the second to the third quarter, they outscored Bethune-Cookman 35-6 after a sloppy first quarter, but Jackson State woke up and Bethune had zero answers. Listen, it was a slow start, and that's something to look out for down the stretches. Can Jackson State do it from the jump? They did it against Alabama A&M, but against Alabama State and Bethune, they really have had trouble early in games to kind of get rolling, and then in the second half, late second quarter, they get it going. But they did it. I mean, they came away with a 30-point win, but let's start with what I saw, man. They used the same formula all season long, and why change it? I mean, let's be honest. If you're winning games like this, why are you changing anything? They got a dominant defense, and then they rest on the arm of Shedeur Sanders. That's it. I mean, that's the formula, especially with how inconsistent the offensive line and running game is. All you got to do is let Shedeur do his thing. All you got to do is let the defense absolutely terrorize the other team, and you're going to win games if you're Jackson State. Now, this may surprise some people. I'm sure I'll get a text or something for some people, but I thought this was Sanders arguably his best game of the season, just personally. And that's because of how bad the O-line play was and how lackluster the running game was. Sanders had to do it all on his own on the offensive side of the ball. He had to consistently push the ball down the field. I believe Lanier and Newman are both still banged up. They haven't really seen this much action recently. So he's just having to carry this offense at times. Now, yes, he can lean on the defense, but you got to give him some credit for how bad that offensive line played. And he still threw for over 300 yards. He still completed over 70% of his passes. And this time, it really wasn't a lot of dinking and dunking, man. He averaged over 12 yards per attempt, had 4 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown as well. He's starting to find his deep ball slowly. Yes, he misses on a few of them, but slowly but surely he is developing that deep ball. And that's the number one thing that was missing early in the season, in my opinion, in his game, because the pocket presence was there, the escapability was there, the football IQ was there. But now that he's getting that deep ball, you can see this passing attack really starting to kind of open up. And the reason, like I said, I thought this was one of the most impressive performances is due to that O-line. And I've been tough on this O-line on this show, and y'all know this because I used to play O-line. I love watching O-linemen play, but they really disappointed me this weekend, man, because you were showing so much improvement, especially against Alabama A&M, and everything that they did right 2 weeks ago just disappeared this weekend. That's the one thing about this Jackson State team that frustrates me is everything's clicking. It's just like this offensive line can't be consistent, and it affects the run game because this O-line allowed 7 sacks this weekend on Shedeur. I mean, Shedeur was getting lit up in the pocket at times. If Shedeur didn't have the pocket presence and escapability he did, they would probably be giving up like 7, 8, 9 sacks a game, man. Because Shedeur is making plays just because he understands how to escape the pocket and where to step up, where to go. But they also did not win the line of scrimmage at all. They paved the way for 23 rushing yards, less than 1 yard per rush. And yes, that includes sacks because that's how it works. But you can't do that. And if you want to dig in deeper, Martin and Marshall, the 2 starting running backs, both averaged under 2.5 yards per carry. That is an indictment on the offensive line. And the reason I'm so tough, guys, is on paper, they should have the best offensive line of the SWAC. They're that big, they're that physical, but they're not playing with the physicality that you want out of an offensive line. And so, that is the one thing I need to see from Jackson State is please put somebody in the ground, just like you were doing against Alabama A&M. There is no reason Bethune-Cookman should have won the line of scrimmage. No reason at all. So for me, the offensive line was like the one disappointing thing about Jackson State's performance this week. And I really felt like that was why they got off to such a slow start, because they tried to establish the run game early, and when it didn't work, Shador tried to get back in the pocket, and they were after him. They forced that early fumble. This offensive line's got to play better, regardless of, if you're a Jackson State fan or not. That's the truth. This offensive line's got to get better. But pull the tapes. I need to find the episode. I have said it on this show. When Malachi Wadman committed to Jackson State, I said I thought he had the highest upside. Him and Quadarius Davis had the highest upside of any wide receiver on this roster. He finally showed why he was a top 200 recruit and a 4-star coming out of high school. This kid is legit. I think so. For me, and I know some Jackson State fans might not agree, I think he has the highest NFL ceiling of any wide receiver on the team. Malachi Wadman has that type of build, that type of athleticism, that type of catch radius, everything. I think he is the full package once he gets things clicking, because he's still very, very raw and young. But when he gets developed, he's going to be a whole problem in the SWAC. But he had 9 catches for 169 yards and 4 touchdowns this weekend. Yes, it was against a winless Bethune team, but that is the type of play that I was expecting out of Wadman when he committed to Jackson State. And it was great to see, because this kid is just fun to watch. And I really think he is going to be the best NFL prospect out of that wide receiving core on the Jackson State offense. And also, Corbin had an amazing game as well. Those two guys were the face of the offense along with Shador. So shout out to both of them. But on the other side of the ball, Bethune-Cookman played as well as they could early, guys. I mean, let's give them credit, man. To jump up 9-0 on Jackson State on the road was impressive, but they had to play a perfect game to even have a chance. And throwing 3 picks, allowing a kickoff return, and not capitalizing on JSU's mistakes like the fumble, that was what kind of cost them. That's what kind of helped this game get out of hand. Yes, the defense gets a lot of credit for making JSU one-dimensional, especially that front 7, but the secondary did not execute well. They allowed Wadman and Corbin to get loose all game long. And even though they were sacking Shador, they were not able to shake his confidence, which is really tough to do. And they tried. They were getting after him, but you could tell they were, after they sacked him a few times and they saw that he was still bombing them. It took the energy out of the defense. Now, the offense was extremely inefficient. You got to give your props to JSU's defense with the sacks and the 3 interceptions. But if you're a Bethune fan tuned in, you got to do something about this quarterback play as well, because it also hurts your run game. You can't be one-dimensional, but you can't be no-dimensional against Jackson State. They couldn't throw the ball, they couldn't run the ball, and that doomed Bethune this weekend. I mean, 70 yards rushing, less than 2.5 yards per carry. And then the 2 quarterbacks, Black was 2 for 7 with a pick for 33 yards, and Patrick was 7 for 20, 119, a touchdown, and 2 picks. He had a few good throws, but you could tell it wasn't consistent enough. Jackson State defense is just too fast and physical for this Bethune offense. And you could tell that once the running game didn't get going and it was put on the quarterbacks, they were not ready to step up and make the plays needed to win the game. But Jackson State continues their march to the SWAC championship. They are in complete control of their destiny. And the saying, just win, baby. That is all Jackson State has to do to get to the SWAC championship. And personally, that the Jackson State Prairie View matchup is going to be one that I would love to see. We'll see if Prairie View can get out of the West. But right now, Jackson State is in full control of the East. As Bethune moves on to try to find their first win of the season, they're going to have some games that I think they could possibly compete in, could possibly pull it off. But we'll kind of talk about those as they come. But the other game, before we get to final takeaways and everything, trying to keep this episode not too long, FAMU continues their SWAC East push with a 3-point win over Mississippi Valley State on the road. And for me, I'm gonna be honest, man. My guy Dwayne and Mr. Campbell probably won't love it. If you really are realistically want to make a playoff run, you got to beat Mississippi Valley by more than 3, man. You can't allow 28 points in the second half to Mississippi Valley State. That's just me, but you're looking at it, and it's almost like FAMU won this game in spite of Rashawn McKay, even though he threw 3 touchdowns. 2 picks kept Mississippi Valley State in the game. Some inaccuracies down the field really hurt them, but Bishop Bonnet is having a year, man. Another 140-yard game, and really and truly, this win goes on. goes on I want to give FAMU a shout, even though they allowed 28 points to shut down the run game like they did, especially Caleb Johnson, who has been killing people in the SWAC. Only 18 carries for 19 yards and one touchdown, with his longest carry being 8 yards. They held Mississippi Valley State under 89 yards, under 90 yards rushing. That's impressive. They only allowed 11 first downs, 3 for 13 on third downs, but they just listen, man, you cannot have 4 turnovers. They had 2 fumbles, 2 interceptions. They literally were the only reason Mississippi Valley State was in this game. They continually shot themselves in the foot to allow Mississippi Valley State to be in this game. I expected a little bit more out of FAMU this weekend. They played really well on the defense side of the ball early, but just the constant turnovers just allowed Valley to be in the game. But just wanted to kind of briefly touch that game. Florida A&M gets a 3-point win over Mississippi Valley State as they look to stay on Jackson State's heels. But man, they're going to need Jackson State to lose twice. So they got Texas Southern coming. Jackson State had Texas Southern next week, and then they got that Southern and Alcorn game. So they are praying and hoping for a prayer. And there's also a chance they can get in the playoffs. So I'm recording on Monday morning, Sunday night. So the rankings come out at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock on Monday. So I'll update you guys on the rankings. I'll probably do a mailbag segment on it, depending on where they're ranked, to kind of preview what their new path is. I'll kind of make that a recurring segment. So I'll let y'all know on that. But final takeaways, just to keep it a little shorter, UAPB blown out in Fayetteville by Arkansas. No surprise there, 45-3. So I guess they at least got some points on the board. Then also Alcorn gets an important SWAC win over Texas Southern on the road. There were some people who thought this could be an upset, but a 44-27 win for Alcorn as they keep rolling. But those were the other games in the SWAC. But the final takeaways for me this weekend is, one, Prairie View established themselves as the favorite in the West right now, even over Alcorn. They've been, for me, the second best team in the SWAC all season long, right behind Jackson State. Just when you look, top 3 defense. They had the number 1 offense in the SWAC coming into the week. I believe they still have that title now. So for me, Prairie View is the easy number 2, and that looks like a collision course in the SWAC championship. FAMU is just going to be nipping at the heels of Jackson State the whole time, but I just don't see how Jackson State drops 2 games as they're playing right now. The other thing is Alcorn just has to keep being as consistent as they've been playing recently. They've come a long way since that week 1 loss, but I've been really impressed how Felix Harper and that run game's come along. The offensive line has had their moments. They just have to be a bit more consistent, but they've also come a long way since we saw them in that, really from like the week 1 all the way to like the first half of that UAPB game. You've got to just keep improving, because when Prairie View comes to town, you cannot lose that line of scrimmage battle. So we'll see that. They got a big test upcoming. But the last thing we'll do here, quick look ahead to week 9. First game, Arkansas Pine Bluff traveling to Texas Southern, 2 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus. Go ahead and pay that $6.99 to get ESPN Plus. But this will be a big game for me, man. This is going to be a big test to see where Texas Southern falls in terms of like the SWAC hierarchy, I would say, because if you could beat Pine Bluff, you kind of cement yourself in that like next tier, that middle tier. But if you lose to Pine Bluff with how they are now, man, that's going to be a tough loss for Texas Southern. But Pine Bluff has to get a win here, man. If you lose to Texas Southern, you might as well pack it in for the season. I don't know if I see you getting another SWAC win. The other game, Alabama A&M, Alabama State, huge rivalry here, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN 3. This is going to be a big one. We probably will preview that game on this channel on Friday. Also, Grambling traveling down to FAMU, 3 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus. Another big test for FAMU. Also, a big test for this Grambling defense and Noah Bowden, or whoever they're starting at quarterback now. And then the big game for a lot of y'all who are subscribed, Jackson State traveling to Mississippi Valley State, 3 p.m. Central Time on, I believe, Mississippi Valley State's YouTube again, guys. So I was looking on ESPN. They don't even have a channel listed for this. So I'm imagining you're going to have to stream it on YouTube on Mississippi Valley State's channel. I'm going to try to find the link and more info for y'all, but I'll post it and keep y'all updated on that. And then Alcorn State Southern, our game of the week here on the Blue Bloods. We'll definitely be previewing this 6 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus. that preview will be dropping Friday, but we definitely will be previewing Alcorn Southern and Jackson State, Mississippi Valley State this Friday. And we'll also probably be doing the A&M Alabama State preview this Friday as well. And then, of course, guys, tune in Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, our live college football mailbag. Go ahead and go to our community page and submit your questions now for that. That way, I'll do some prep for y'all, get y'all all the information I can. And then I'll also be taking y'all's live questions about anything regarding college football. So make sure to tune in for that and make sure to subscribe if you're new, like the video, and comment your takeaways from all the SWAC action this weekend. And I'm so looking forward to week 9, man. That Alcorn Southern game is going to be amazing. A&M Alabama State has some serious implications for coaching jobs and expectations for the season. So make sure to tune in for that. But guys, for right now, the Blue Bloods are out.